Okay. Hello everybody. Thank you for coming to the requirements modeling group talk. One of the great things about speaking in a small room is that it looks like so crowded and so full. So I'm glad that you're all excited about requirements. So I'm going to talk here with Raphael and Tristan about the requirements modeling framework, which is an Eclipse project that has something to do with requirements. The project is an Eclipse Foundation project. It's a few years old. It is the result of a research project I started a few years back, and when I started that, I looked for collaborators and I found some. There was another research project that was doing something similar, and so we joined forces, and that was really great. Those were mainly the folks from ETMIS, and we really managed to build something up that I think is pretty exciting, and that came a far, far away in a very short time. So this is what I want to talk about. I want to quickly let Tristan and Raphael introduce themselves.
Okay, so Raphael Foudou from Ethos. I'm in charge of R&D methods and tools for our embedded systems. And we are strongly involved in modeling through the Top Case initiative.
So one of the exciting things about the project is that it's not happening somewhere in isolation, but there are like so many things already happening around it. So this is what we want to talk about today. First of all, I want to set the stage, and for those who don't yet know the project and what it's all about, I'm going to provide some of the basics. And then you're going to see some action. We have like a number of demos prepared, I think 3 demos altogether. So there's a lot of real live action to see. And then to give an outlook, amongst other things, we're going to brag about all the cool things that are currently being done with RMF and what we have in mind for the future. So that's our plan. So there are a lot of acronyms: ProR, ReqIF, RMF, maybe RIF, whatnot. So what is this all about? Well, as I said, we started with research projects. So the idea was to develop requirements engineering in an academic area. But at the same time, those people working on that realized that there was like a big opportunity waiting in the marketplace. And the opportunity was formerly RIF, now called ReqIF. Show of hands, who heard of RIF or ReqIF before? Oh, quite a few people, that's great. So it's a standard that was actually initiated by the German automotive industry a few years ago, several years ago, probably like 7 or 8 years ago by now, because there's a problem. The automotive industry, at least in Germany, they write very complex requirements documents consisting of tens of thousands of requirements. They exchange them with their suppliers, and managing this amount of data can be quite a challenge. And of course, there are tool vendors who provide proprietary solutions for that. But the manufacturers said, well, we want to have like something more open so that we're not so locked into with those vendors. So they started an initiative called RIF, Requirements Interchange Format. And over the years, it got more and more standardized, first in Germany, and now it is actually an OMG standard. So it's actually an international standard, and that makes it like really attractive for this kind of work. Because when these research projects decided that we need something to store requirements, it made a lot of sense to go with an open format to allow integration and interoperability. So having said that, RMF is the first, and as far as I know, the only open source reference implementation of ReqIF. So the project itself consists of 2 parts. One is the core that can process ReqIF. Again, it was meant as an exchange format, so it's an XML-based file format. And the core can process it, read it, write it, manipulate it, do stuff with it. And we also have the GUI sitting on top of that called ProR. And that is something that you will also see in the demo later on. Hello? Here we go. So, yes. Somehow this is a bit flaky today. So, ReqIF, as I said, it's a file format, but it's XML-based, so it has an underlying data model. And I just want to give you like a very brief overview of that. So, if you look at ReqIF, you basically have a container, ReqIF, that contains stuff. That's the header, that's some tool extensions where the tools can write whatever they want to. But the most important part is you can put in content. And I want to give you an idea of how this structured content looks like. So, well, it doesn't look good. So, the most important part is the so-called spec object. The spec object is a requirement, except that the spec object by itself doesn't have any information that it carries. The spec object is typed, and the type defines the attributes that the spec object, the requirement, has. So typically, you know, for textual requirement, you would have like the actual requirement text. You would have maybe an ID, maybe a status, maybe an author, whatnot. So the spec type defines the attributes which are any of certain data types that can also be defined. So the whole is self-contained. The data types are part of the exchange format. So once you have your requirements, that's nice and good. You also want to be able to establish relationships between them. Those are the spec relations, so links. And they also can be typed. So you can have arbitrary number of attributes attached to a link. So far so good. And also the requirements at this point are simply, you know, like a big bag of requirements. You want to put them in a structured form. So that's what the so-called specifications are for, that arrange the requirements in a tree-like structure. And then there's some other stuff that I don't even want to talk about. So far so good. So that's the data model. So even though this was designed as an exchange format, as a file format, we realized, not only we, there's also a commercial project that does this, we realized that we can use this data model as a foundation for a tool. So rather than using it for an exchange, we use it actually underneath an application. And this is essentially the architecture. So, you know, the Eclipse stack with Java underneath and plugins. And here sits our RIF core that allows the reading and writing of ReqIF. And this is based on EMF. So we have actually an EMF model of the ReqIF in memory here. And that's what we work with. Okay? And because it's EMF based, it's also fairly easy to integrate that with other EMF based Eclipse applications. So that's pretty cool. So what do we have on top of that? There's the user interface, ProR. And that's what I'm going to show you in a second. And you can do with that whatever you would expect from a requirements tool. Maybe not as comfortable, but it's a start. Who here knows doors, for example? Okay. Who knows Excel? Actually, Office is one. It's actually the widely used requirements management tool in the world, as far as I know. I don't think that has changed ever since. So basically, the interface is like a little bit like doors, like Excel, like, and you'll see it in a minute. So we became an Eclipse Foundation project, I think, 2011. Right now, we are at 200 downloads a month, and it's growing steadily. So we're pretty excited about that. So what's really important for you, if you do something with Eclipse and you have tools that you want to integrate, we have the ability to extend ProR. And we designed an extension point that makes it easy to provide your own renderer, your own editors, and to hook into various places into the system. So another reason why we decided on building this on top of Eclipse is that we looked at Eclipse in the area of systems engineering. So Eclipse in systems engineering has been really, really popular in the last few years. And there are already a number of frameworks available, but there really hasn't been anything for requirements. So that was the other reason why I thought, okay, this is really a good place to create such a reference implementation of the standard. Okay, I think with that, I'm already ready to give you like a little tour of the tool. Any questions at this point? Okay. So you can download ProR standalone. What I'm showing you here is ProR installed by the update side in another Eclipse application, because the second demo will actually be a demonstration of the integration features. So here you see a tool called Rodin, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But all I want to do right now is showing you ProR. So first we need a project. Any project will do. In preparation of the second demo, I'm creating an event project. So we call this EclipseCon. Okay. And in here, you can create a new requirements document, either like a standard model. In this case, the integration plugin provides its own customized requirements document. We're going to use that. You can give it a name. And so the first thing you'll see is an overview editor that gives you some information about this requirements model. Remember the model that I just explained with the spec object and so forth? You can navigate that in the outline. So you see here the spec objects. This model has 2 elements just put in there as placeholders. You see the specifications that I talked about up here. So there are already 2 in here. And we can see them like a little bit better in a second. And the spec relations, the relations group, and some other stuff over there. But you should roughly recognize the model that I just demonstrated and showed on the slides 5 minutes ago. Okay, so let's look at the requirement document. So this is basically a view. Here we go. A view of the requirements, and you see that it's already filled up with one sample spec object or requirement, the way you want to see it. Just make it a little bit easier to look at on the screen, a bit smaller. So what I want to show you later on is a little demonstration of a model integration. And I want to model a tiny little system for demonstration purposes, a traffic light system. So I can now go in here and write down the first requirement. So in this case, we want to have like a pedestrian traffic light. So the traffic light for the cars has the colors red, yellow, and green. Okay, and the 3 sizes, of course. This is plain text, as you've seen. We also have drop-downs. I mean, this is for the method that we're using. You can ignore that, but you see all that kind of stuff is there. If you want to create a new one, you can just use the context menu and create the new child. If you want to have it indented, it's a tree structure or a sibling. If you want it on the same level, and we want to just add another requirement and say the same for the pedestrian traffic light. And this is has only 2 colors, like that. Okay, and if you think that's too much clicking, you can of course also use the keyboard. So, and this basically describes, what, I mean, this only describes the domain, and this is actually the first requirement, the safety requirement to make sure that, people are not killed by cars, right? So, this is basically how we work with that. Now, I told you that the requirements are typed, right? So, where are the types? There's a menu for that, where you can see what we have. And because this is a template that we use, you see that there are a relatively high number of types already. This is the one I just used. And here you see the 3 attributes that we have. We have the description, which is text. We have like this column, which is an enumeration. You saw that with the drop-down box. So if I click on that, you can actually see that I have access to the data types down here. You see that this is an enumeration. You can also have multi-valued, basically what you would expect. So further down here, you have the actual values, which you can also go on and edit. So you get a rough idea. It's no rocket science, but it allows you to very quickly build up like meta models for your requirements and then fill in the requirements themselves. So what you can, so far all this you can do with Excel as well. What you cannot do with Excel is an important thing in requirements engineering, which is linking, creating links. You can create links with drag and drop. What we actually just implemented in the latest version, which really helps a lot, is that we can also create links in a 2-step process. You initiate linking, and then you basically say, okay, I want to make that an incoming or outgoing link, and you get it already with the proper type. So let me just open up the links. And so now you see, this doesn't make sense, of course, but you see that I linked this element to this one over here. And because it's typed, I can also put a description in here. So, description, So now you have, you created a link. Let me undo that because this is really not what you need. One more thing which you may find useful. So you can see we have here the actual requirement text. That's not very pretty, so that's also something that you can customize. You can say, I want to use the ID if it's available. So put in the ID here. And what we do now is basically, if an element has an ID, we're going to show it. If there's no ID, we use the description. If that doesn't exist, we use the internal ID. So you can see here that it already updated the IDs. So yeah, that's pretty much like the high-speed overview of the ProR user interface. There are many features that I didn't talk about, but yeah, we don't have the time to cover everything. So this is the foundation. At my organization, we created what we call the Essentials, which is a package of 3 extensions that allows you to do like more than what I just showed you. For example, the standard supports rich text by using XHTML. The open source version doesn't support that, so we created a plugin so that you can see formatted text and edit formatted text. We provided some tools for import-export, for diffing on the model basis, so that you can basically put your stuff in a version control system, because of course you don't want to deal with XML diffing. Instead we do model diffing, and so forth. So if you decide to check out this tool, then I strongly encourage you to install it. It's for free, so it makes a lot of things a little bit easier. What I want to demonstrate now, and I think this is the really, really interesting part about RIF, I want to show you how the integration with models work. Because you don't want to use requirements in isolation. You really want to cover many aspects of your system development, and you want to create a traceability, right? So what I'm going to show you here comes out of the academic area. So it's from a research project. So please don't get scared by formal methods. The model that we're integrating things, requirements with here, is a formal model, but everywhere you could as good use UML or SysML or some other formalism or a DSL. The point is, we have an EMF-based model that we integrate with. Question? Okay, good. So again, don't be scared by formal methods. And with that, I want to show you how such an integration can look like. So event B is relatively mathematical. If we want to integrate this with the formal model, first we have to get our vocabulary straight. And I can start right in the requirements by telling the system what is part of my vocabulary. For example, the traffic light for the cars, I'll give it like a more concise name, tier cars. And I just put it here into square brackets. And the system immediately recognizes that I tell the system this is a symbol, but it hasn't been modeled yet. That's why it's red. So I mark a few more symbols here. Okay. Okay, and you see tons of red. So now we want to turn the red into green. So I create a formal model. And again, I mean, don't worry about the details because this is a rather mathematically looking formalism. I create a so-called context that defines all the static elements in my model. So colors are static, right? So let me just set. So now I create the symbols for the colors, red, yellow, and green. And that's part of the formalism. I have to basically tell the system what colors are, so the partition of the colors. And of course, you have autocomplete here as you would expect. Things like that. And green. Okay. So this should be enough. Okay. Now if I go back to my requirements, voila, you see that those symbols are green because the system recognized that that these symbols have been created. Okay, so far so good. The cars, the symbol is not created yet, but the dynamic aspect because the traffic light changes. So I have to create a new component here, which is a so-called machine, which defines the dynamic aspects of the system. And so I need to see my context, the one I just created, sees. And then I basically create a variable for the cars, and for the pedestrians, and I need so-called invariants that type them. So if I have here cars type, and again, I mean, you could do the same thing with something like SysML. So do the same with pedestrians. Okay, let's go back to the requirements. And you see everything is green. Are you still with me? Okay, good. So what's interesting is here, if you look at this, this is a property of the domain. It describes our setting. And I just modeled this formally. So now I can go into my model here in this browser, and I just created like this typing invariant. And by just dragging it over here, I create a traceability. Let me just make it a little bit smaller so that we can see more stuff. Okay, now you see that I linked this textual element with this formal element, which we can see down here. And now basically the engineer can look at the text and look at the formal statement down here and basically say, yep, that matches, I'm happy with that, that's properly modeled. Let me do the same with this here. Okay, and who can spot the problem?
Color.
What's wrong with the color?
The yellow.
Yeah, yellow, that's right. We only want red and green, right? So let me go to the formal model. And basically say, no, we don't want all the colors. In this case, we only want red and green. Better? Okay. So let's go back here to the requirements. And because the element is simply referenced, now we can check here and say, yep, that's right. You also see this exclamation mark? Yeah? That tells me basically that the model element changed, and the user can now go through all the elements marked with an exclamation mark and say, okay, is this still correct? And if yes, dismiss it. Works the other way around as well. So if I change text, then basically on save, there should be an exclamation mark. So I don't know why not. Okay, but with this, I conclude the second demo. And now I'd like to hand over to Tristan, who will show a project where RMF has been integrated with.
So let's start. Okay, so this is a presentation, the small overview of ReqCycle, and we will get a demo in just 2 minutes. So why ReqCycle? ReqCycle is an initiative to manage requirements, okay, the different types of requirements, because sometimes the requirements are not necessarily the same structure for system requirements, software requirements, hardware requirements, and so on. So we want to manage the attribute, the link, the rights, things that you can do in those or in other requirement database, and we want to link those requirements with other requirements and any model element or code or anything. So those, well, those classical solution, but those school for requirement management, but not to get linked with model elements. SysML, okay, you have requirement in SysML, you have the traceability link, the satisfy, and so on. But no link with requirements that are in those, that want to remain in those, and no link with other languages like Git, Simulink, or anything. ReqCycle, rectified traceability, commercial tool that can analyze link, perfect, okay, but cannot manage deletion or deletion of link. Okay. And RMF, okay, perfect. We had a good demo from Michael. It's a good starting point, but for complete traceability, we consider it too generic and too low level 6 months ago. So we started ReqCycle, and probably we will have some more collaboration so we have some demo where we import RECIF and requirement and use RMF and for R. And last point, open solution. So ReqCycle overview in one slide, and then it's the demo. You get your user environment, files, databases, user tool. Then you get different requirement sources. Can be RECIF file coming from those for any tool, but can be still a DOS database. Currently, DOS database cannot necessarily export to RECIF. Depends on the release. Documentation, Excel, Word, and so on. SysML, whatever you want. Then you get your models, SysML, Simulink, SPDL, whatever you want. Source code, the test case, okay, and don't continue. Right, so ReqCycle component, you get a data model, something like the requirement scopes, the system, subsystem, software, hardware, different level what you would like to address, the access right, the different sources you would like to integrate. By integrity, I mean you can import the requirement or just reference the requirement and they stay in their repository. The requirement type with attributes and the different link that you can do with the requirement or with other elements. So you get connectors to the different parts. You get internal connector if you don't want to take requirements from outside. You want to manage your requirements with the internal links, and we will use ProR for that. And then you get the requirement view connected to the different requirement sources so that you can gather everything. So it's kind of aggregation of your requirements. You get the different view, and then you can customize the view and filter them about version, about applicability, about different attributes from your requirements, filter them. And at the end, most important, and the demo will be more about that, the traceability link that you can do from your requirement view with different requirements at different levels or with model element, for instance, SysML and for code and for test case. And then at the end, you can export to XML, SysML, right. Now, let's start the demo. It's a very early prototype, and I'll come back after for the roadmap.
Yes, it will be an Ignite demo. So first, I want to present you so it's a basic Eclipse, here in my previous model. I will want to present you the tip management ReqCycle. So we have defined some tip elements in my configuration. We can say that there is some model elements, SysML elements, UML elements, requirement in the large sense. We can extend the type to say I want a SysML element, but I want specifically a block, or specifically a requirement, and I can extend as I want. UML element for the same, I can say there is enumeration, etc. My first use case, I have a design in SysML, and I want to satisfy the requirements that Michael expressed. So I have basically my requirements in SysML that I copied. The TL cars and the colors will be yellow and green, and to satisfy, I said I have an enumeration with the different parts. First, I want to test with ReqCycle if my traceability is maintained with a satisfied link. So I take my enumeration, I said I want direction upward, and I check. So I check my enumeration, and yes, I have satisfied. My enumeration is a model element, a UML element, and an enumeration, and my requirement is a SysML element requirement. What I want to test now is, yes, it's good, but I have a RECIF file exported by Michael, so I want to connect it. Okay, RECIF connector, I can have several connectors. I create my repository, EclipseCon France, my scope, to say, okay, it's my aggregation, customer, and my RECIF file is my RECIF that Michael sent me. You didn't see it. I create a basic mapping. Okay, requirement type, description. Okay, sorry, I go a little fast to go on the detail of the domain. I map with the specification type. It's something you can register and don't have. It's not necessary in the future. Okay, I finish. Yes. I have a connection to a RECIF file. I can show it here. And this is the list of my requirements. It's just as a not a prototype, but early version, a kind of a label, final label. Now I want to say, okay, I have my RIF requirement. I want to say it's a copy with my XML requirement. So I can go to my configuration and define my traceability types. I create my configuration EclipseCon France. I say it's the default one, and I create a trace between a requirement in the large semantic. It says it's upstream, and downstream I have a requirement XML, and this is a link typed copy. For the next exercise, I want to say I have a relation between a requirement in upstream and between a requirement, a block XML element in downstream, kind satisfied. So this is my configuration. Now I can say, okay, I'm in Papyrus, I have my enumeration, my requirements, and this is my requirement ReqCycle. I want to create a traceability directly to my ReqCycle file. I can drag and drop it to my requirement, and the configuration is analysis to say, okay, it's not very visible, but I have an upstream to downstream link, which is a copy from a requirement to requirement, which is XML. So if I want to test it, I can go here, say, okay, this is my requirement from ReqCycle, and when I ask for the traceability, I can see that downward, sorry, in downward, that I have a copy to my requirement, which is satisfied by my enumeration. Now, the second use case is I don't want to focus on my XML requirement. I want to create directly satisfied between my ReqCycle and my enumeration. So I take the same requirement, drag and drop it on the enumeration. Yeah. I think it's the configuration that I missed. No, sorry. It's not a block. I create a satisfied relation between a requirement and an enumeration because it's not a block. Satisfied. So if I drag and drop my requirement to enumeration, upstream to downstream, I satisfy from requirement to enumeration. Dynamic. So if I refresh, you can see that I copy a requirement which satisfies the RAP, and I satisfy directly the enumeration. Now I want to go further. I say, look, I have some code that maybe has been generated or that I wrote, the enumeration in Java corresponding to my enumeration in my XML model. And basically I've created an enumeration which can be applied on an enumeration. So if I have color chart, I can configure ReqCycle to say recognize my Java notation as enum generated can trace. I can say enum generated with the path of my model. And if I trace, I can see that my enumeration is traced to my code. Another good feature, if I can see that, okay, I want to go in the other direction, I want to see if my enumeration is traced by a XML requirement. Okay, I say, does my requirement is traced by a XML? Refresh. True. Upward, of course. Because so yes, it's traced by the requirement XML. Is it traced by something which doesn't make sense by a block? Refresh. No links. This is basically the idea of the traceability in ReqCycle. We can manage explicit traceability created by drag and drop, or traceability derived from information from the domain.
You can restrict the configuration.
Yeah. So yes, I can select the configuration that I created.
Second slide.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit
Just
almost out of time.
Yeah, meanwhile, in very, very short, so the roadmap for ReqCycle, that's very early prototype. The first public release in open source will be at the end of September, so you see the list, and in November, what is important, we intend to submit the first proposal for the ReqCycle component to reach the PolarSys consortium. So, if you want more information about PolarSys, come and see me or Patrick or other people. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to enumerate all the things going on, but there are lots of activities happening around RMF and ReqIF and ProR, both on the academic and industrial side. So we're pretty excited. I don't want to go through the details here. Talk to us if you want to. And I think with that, we don't want to stress your time any further. And thank you very much for your attention. And if you have one or more questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. Quick questions. We are already 1 minute over time. So. Any questions? Yeah.
Is there an integration provided for OSLC?
No, not yet. But we're definitely looking into it.
So the technology behind OSLC, which are RDF, are already used for the customer.
All right. Thank you very much.